Welcome everyone to AI for Social Good. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we speak and pay my respect to their leaders past, present and emerging. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Now, I've been asked twice this morning whether or not my lessons from saving Bletchley Park, and I hate to disappoint you if you think that I'm Dr. Black. I've actually been this colour for longer than she has. My name's LJ Locke and I wear a number of hats. I'm actually here as one of the co-founders of Outspoken Women, and we have a workshop going on tomorrow at 11 o'clock, which I look forward to seeing you at, which is about amplifying your influence in the workplace. But it is with great pleasure that I interview someone I've known for a very long time and who I respect, who is the moderator for the next panel. It's the amazing Kylie Ahern, who is an engagement transformer like no other that I have ever worked with, and I've worked with a range of transformers over the years and game changers. Kylie has done all sorts of things, and among some of the projects that you may not be aware of the work that she and her team at STEM Matters have worked on has been the development of the STEM commitment for Westpac, which was no mean feat, going in and making a financial services organisation actually focus on what they are doing and what they can be doing to champion STEM in the Australian economy. They did phenomenal work for the Queensland Brain Institute. And get this, they actually helped them tell their story and engage with their stakeholders in a way that saw them meet 27 million of their $30 million goal in just 2 years. And she's also responsible for pulling together the Space Agency policy for Australia, which involved understanding, absorbing and translating the views and expert opinions of a whole range of stakeholders and pulling it together into a document that actually was coherent and cohesive and convinced Cabinet to support the initiative. So if your phones aren't on silent, make sure they are on silent. There will be 15 minutes for questions at the end of this awesome panel. And if for some reason we need the exit, it's over there to the right. Should there be an emergency, we will proceed in an orderly fashion. And on that note, Kylie, over to you.
What an introduction. Thanks, LJ. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be here with my panel today. We're talking about AI for social good. The commentary has been for years around AI for social bad, effectively the Terminator. Every time I wear my Australian Centre for Robotic Vision hoodie, my brother accuses me of working for Skynet. And cab drivers, when I say I'm on my way to an AI event to moderate, will explain to me about killer robots. So there's some cab drivers out there who know a lot about AI, apparently. So this narrative that we have, which is fun to read, you know, in dystopian novels and sci-fi, is actually quite damaging in terms of public confidence in AI. It's difficult, obviously, to recruit people who are thinking, well, I would like to contribute positively to the world if their perception of AI is quite negative. So today we're going to change that to AI for social good. So Monash Faculty of Information Technology has been investing a lot in AI for social good and recruiting some pretty brilliant researchers from all over the world, and we're lucky to have one here, Dr. Mor Vered. Mor moved over here earlier this year and joined as lecturer in the new Laboratory for Dialogue Research. In 2018, she won the highly prestigious Israeli Association for Artificial Intelligence Outstanding Dissertation Award. Mor wanted to be a vet, but she felt that through a career in technology, she would have a greater impact, and we're going to hear about that impact today. She's a firm believer in a cross-disciplinary approach, combining cognitive science, neuroscience and biology. We also have with us, well, I'm sort of not going in the right order, but I'm going in the order of my notes, sorry. We also have with us Grace Kerrison, who's flown in this morning on the red eye from Singapore after celebrating her 20th year wedding anniversary yesterday, so congratulations. Grace is the Vice President and MD of Pymetrics, and Pymetrics, and Grace will explain this further, is all about using AI to remove bias. Now, we don't often hear that. We hear about bias being embedded in AI, so I'm looking forward to hearing about what that means. I think it's an interesting story, the Pymetrics background, so we'll hear from Grace around that. And Grace has worked at LinkedIn, Cisco and Microsoft, so deep technology experience here across the corporate sector. And our final panellist in the middle, the amazing Dr. Catherine Ball, and many of you will know her. She's an author, founder, executive director and ethics advocate working across global projects where emerging technologies meet humanitarian, education and environmental needs. She's also a brilliant business creator as well. I'm not sure if any of you, or hopefully a lot of you, are going to the Worlds of Drones conference in September that Catherine founded. And if you haven't accessed her World of Drones education material, I'd suggest you do so. She's put a huge amount of effort into it and they're top quality. Outside of that, she's created projects that use drone to kill weeds on rock cliff faces. This is one of the many, many things that Catherine's done, but I find that one particularly impressive. The AFR Boss magazine called her the 2017 Game Changer. She's been one of AFR's 100 Women of Influence and also won the Telstra Businesswoman of the Year. So please welcome our amazing panel. So I wanted to kick off with some inspirational stories. So when you walk out of here and someone says, killer robots, Terminator, Skynet, you actually have the incredible stories. So over to you, Mor. Do you want to start with it? The panellists are going to talk about inspiring projects that they're seeing locally and globally.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear? Okay, thank you for that very kind introduction. I feel very fortunate to be here among these amazing women. Imposter syndrome kicking in with a vengeance, but okay, let's give it a go. So basically, I'd like to give some examples of work that I'm currently involved in Monash University, and then, if it's okay, I'll give a couple of examples of other things that are happening. So, for example, we have just recently launched a new lab. It's called the ILAX Lab, which is AI for law enforcement and community safety. And it's a joint project between Monash University and the Australian Federal Police. And it is considering and it's aiming to use AI to assist the police officers who are performing very difficult, emotionally difficult jobs every day. And those are the people that they have to go through offensive material online, lots of child exploitation images, and they have to see these continually in order to determine to what level of severity to place it. Now, these people then go home and they have children, and this affects them extremely. Some of them cannot keep pictures of their children on the phone. It's usually something that they can only do for a short period of time, and then they're just worn out completely. So the aim of this group is to actually attempt to do this kind of categorization automatically in a way where people who are not trained to or don't necessarily need to be exposed to these kind of images won't be exposed to them, and definitely not at the current amount that they are. So it's really about protecting the well-being of these officers, which is indeed it's very, very important and very inspiring. Another such example is work that we're currently doing with the campus in Malaysia. And it's about developing an app for cancer patients currently undergoing treatment. So the original idea of this app was for them to kind of monitor their symptoms, and if anything happens within these symptoms, then to alert the doctor. And most of these people, they cannot go to the hospital and they cannot go to the doctor every day. But then we realized that there was a hidden problem, which was even perhaps more important, is that when these people who are from different socioeconomical status, different demographic backgrounds, when they come to the doctor, they don't necessarily report their symptoms because they are intimidated, they feel not on an equal footing. And basically what this app will do is for them to be able to monitor as they go, and then before they actually talk to the doctor, it will give them a way to interact with the doctor. It will give them different versions of what they should or want to say, and actually empower them to have this conversation. So those are just a couple of the projects that we're doing, but Monash has a very big AI for social school aspect, so a lot of people are actually working on this. But this is now really an international phenomenon. I'd like to give a couple more examples. So these are examples from Milind Tambe's group back when he was with the UC on university. He's now in Harvard. Southern California University. He's now in Harvard. And basically what they did was they attempted to predict the trajectories of poachers and where they would put their traps. And then they actually drove to Africa, they went to Africa and they worked with the rangers and they tipped them off as to where these poachers would be, and they were able to recover 90% more traps for 1 month when compared to the previous one. So again, big conservation going on. And there's lots and lots of other examples. Just mention one last one is work that they're currently doing with the homeless population in California. And they have seen that there is a much higher rate of spreading HIV over the homeless population than there is over the main population. And so what they did, they used kind of algorithms from known AI algorithms and from game theory and all of these to track potential people within the homeless community who could be kind of leaders and could convince others to go get tested and to teach them about HIV and how to be protected. And again, this has had an enormous impact. So a whole lot more people are now being tested and are being treated, and they're keeping a lot safer, being educated. And this is all through AI for social good. So these projects are not necessarily the most published, and they definitely don't bring in money, but they actually do a lot of good. And these are really key people within the AI. So Milind Tambe is now in Harvard. So key people are really looking into this. So it's actually a very beautiful trend. Like you were saying, it's not all bad, right? We have the tools to actually make the world a better place.
Thank you, Mor. Catherine.
I don't know how to follow that. Okay, so one of the big things that's happening that not a lot of people are talking about, only a couple of countries have really got to grips with this, is that we have Industry 5.0 on the horizon. Now, the fifth industrial revolution is supposed to start in 2020. And I'm supposed to have a baby before 2020, so it's not very far away. And the idea about Industry 5.0 is taking everything that we've achieved for the last 10 or 20 years by creating wonderful sensors and wonderful ways in which we can communicate and have devices communicate with each other, and actually put the social good at the heart of it, actually put the human being at the heart of the why. And the reason why this is important is because AI is going to be absolutely fundamental to this. So when we look at some disasters or some incidents that have happened in recent times, and we look at the Grenfell Tower fire, for example, if they'd had proper fire sensors in there that were talking to each other, could that fire have been picked up sooner? Probably, yes. Could those people have been evacuated? Probably, yes. If that building had been part of a digital twin program looking at predictive methodology around escaping during a disaster, would they have pulled everybody out of that tower, demolished it and built a new one? Possibly, yes. And so I get very angry, not very frequently actually, Kylie, it has to be said, but when I do get angry, I do shout at the television. And when I saw Grenfell Tower happening, I shouted at the television for a number of reasons. We have drone technology that can rescue people from burning buildings. The London Fire Brigade didn't even have ladders that could reach the highest levels. There's a terrible digital divide happening, whereby there's pockets that have access to these technologies, and AI is fundamental to how these technologies are applied across society, but not everybody has access to them. And I think that's a bit of a call in the room. And it's all well and good as having these technologies, that's fantastic, but if not everybody has an equitable access to them, that's a tragedy. So hopefully Industry 5.0 will help us refresh how we actually look at big data. So without AI, drones will not get to their full potential. Without AI, big data will not get to its full potential. My mother survived breast cancer, and we know now we can use AI to be more accurate than the human eye at looking for breast cancer. Why aren't we using that already? When we look at personalised medicine, AI is going to be fundamental to how we look at personalised medicine and genomic medicine and nanomedicine. The cure for cancer is in our hands. We'll be vaccinating against cancer in the next 10 years. I'll put $5 on that. And we won't be able to do that without an ability to create all of these massive multidisciplinary parts of data that can actually speak to each other. And the expression we have in the drone industry is that we will drown in data and starve for information. Anybody who's ever had an argument with an Excel spreadsheet can probably relate to that concept. So talking about poaching, for example, so there was an article recently about how people have been using drones to scare off poachers away from rhinos. They have no idea of the sophistication of some of the drone devices that are currently being used by poachers and by sovereign nations who like to buy those poached goods to actually find the animals that they actually want to go and take. So we actually have drone warfare happening in Africa right now, purely trying to protect rhinos. Now, the only way we're going to be able to map and handle that amount of data is using an AI and machine learning platform. To look at an Australian example, we have some wonderful businesses looking at using shark detection algorithms. So we can actually have drones flying around our beaches looking for sharks. They can now automatically onboard process whether or not you're looking at Mick Fanning, an award-winning surfer, a shark, a dolphin, a bait ball of fish, or a manta ray. And you know, that's all well and good, but unless you're going to do something about it, basically all you're filming is people getting eaten. So luckily we had a woman came up with an idea of sticking a shark alarm on a drone as well. So we now have lifesavers across Queensland and New South Wales using drones that have onboard AI processing live imagery, working out whether it's a shark and then telling people to get out. They didn't have that in Jaws. We have that here. The other thing is, you know, drones create a lot of data, When I first started looking at using drones for environmental surveys, we were starting to look at either renting the Pawsey Centre in Western Australia, which is where Lisa Harvey-Smith might compete with me on that, because it's where they process all the information from the square kilometre array. But we were literally looking at needing petabytes of data storage and data handling. And unfortunately, as a corporate organisation, we have obligations under legal methodology where we have to keep copies of all data for 7 years. How fast do you think we're going to fill up our servers? How fast are we going to be filling up the cloud, which is effectively just somebody else's server? You know, and the answer is pretty damn fast, unless you've got a way to stream that data into the information that you want. DNA is going to be used for data storage going forward, so that's going to be pretty cool. But, you know, we also use, that's an Australian thing, we also use data. So we've got this thing called unmanned traffic management, we've got anti-collision devices, airspace safety, Gatwick Gate, if anyone noticed, Gatwick was shut down there for a little short amount of time, didn't make the headlines at all, really, did it? And so the idea of actually keeping our critical infrastructure and our airports safe is going to be based on being able to decide whether it's a plastic bag or a drone. And unfortunately, pilots aren't very good at identifying the difference between the two. We've had a number of drone incidences at airports that were just plastic bags. Queensland is actually leading the way. You're in the right place. If you're into drone technology, I suggest you stick around. Queensland is leading the rest of Australia, and Australia's leading the rest of the world. We've had commercial drone legislation here for 17 years. People like Airbus, Facebook, Google like to come and play in our airspace. We're attracting in some of the flying car companies from places like Toyota and Nissan. So we are becoming the sort of drone trial and test hub here. We've got the Centre for Autonomous Systems Research, a number of universities, and I haven't even started talking about agriculture, biosecurity, geospatial mapping, climate change mitigation and monitoring, the Great Barrier Reef and looking at how things are affecting the Great Barrier Reef, and also how this actually fits very nicely into computer vision, which is something Australia is also very good at. So in terms of AI for social good, there is actually a company in the US called Skynet, you know, Kylie.
Oh, really?
And what they produce is a shotgun cartridge with a net in it. So if you have a drone come over your land, you can get your shotgun out and take it out of the sky, which is technically illegal, so don't do that. But the company
is it illegal
called
in the
Sky.
States?
I don't know. The thing is, it's called interfering with an aircraft, so it could well be under airspace legislation that you're not allowed to mess with drones there anyway. At that point, I'll take breath.
We could keep going on that one. I want to ask you some questions.
Wow.
Grace.
I'm going to follow that. No, it's a good segue, because what Catherine has called out are new and emerging technologies that are opening up new jobs for people. So from a Pymetrics perspective, our mission is to help every person find their place in the world of work. And what that really means is that how do we remove the bias in the way you and I are looked at when it comes to a career, whether it's today or in the future. And so to us, Pymetrics is about how do you leverage technology, such as AI, machine learning, and overlay that with cognitive neuroscience So instead of judging the book by its cover using CV, it's really about what are those innate traits that would make you successful in the role. And so to me, it's the, as Kylie said, I've worked for Cisco, I've worked for Microsoft, I've worked for LinkedIn. I've always been in the leading edge of technology. And when Frida Poli, who is the founder and CEO of Pymetrics, approached me, what she's trying to do and her North Star around fairness really resonated with me. Look at me. I could be the poster child for diversity, but I'm also a recipient on a daily basis of unconscious bias. And so when we're talking about new technologies and automation and robotics and drones, I'm seeing the opportunity that companies and government and industry can no longer just look at a traditional way of judging somebody because those experiences it doesn't even exist. And so to us, it's about how do you drive fairness in a process that allows a company or government or industry to look at each talent and really map them to what they can be predictively great at, whether it's the first role they're landing in a company or future roles. So with us, it's, data. One of the data points out there, it's, Kylie spoke about, automation or robotics taking over jobs. My view is that this is actually augmenting human capability because it is creating new jobs. So by 2025, 75 million jobs will be displaced, but 133 million jobs will be newly created. So that's
the stat we should be quoting.
Exactly. So 133 million new jobs is not yet created today. But yet a lot of companies are still looking at the CV as the first pass filter, and to us, that's so if you're one of those that look at a CV, then you are definitely biased because for a recruiter, the average time a recruiter looks at somebody's CV, that's 6 seconds, because it's no longer there's a job posting on the paper. It's been democratized. So most companies, for every role, they get about between 250 to 500 CVs. And so how does a recruiter kind of go through that when you're a known brand? So I'll just give you some examples of the types of companies that we're working with globally. Yeah. And by the way, Australia is also leading the way as far as removing the CV as the first pass filter. Right. So if you look at one of the sponsors here, big mining company, and they're investing heavily in robotics and in automation. But one of their goals is to have a workforce of 50% female by 2025. Yep. And to us, that creates the opportunity in that they will no longer, the end goal is how do you have robots actually be in the mines and keep people safe? And so that the jobs is becoming from, going into mining to actually behind, a room like this, and you're a controller. And so I'm seeing more and more of those in particular industries, whether it's oil and gas and mining, becoming more prevalent. We did a pilot with that particular mining company, and the ability to basically cast a wide net and achieve, at least for that particular business unit, a 50-50 diversity of applicants is amazing. And so we're continuing to work with them to see how can we roll this out globally. But it's not just about gender diversity, it's diversity at all levels. Because, you hit gender, you hit ethnic, you hit socioeconomic diversity as well. And that is basically what Unilever, again, who's rolled this out globally, has done for their Future Leaders program. So this is for grads. They used to only go to 250 universities globally, and now they go to 2,500 universities. And the level of, again, is moving the needle of diversity across levels is amazing. One that is near and dear to my heart, as far as a key project a key initiative that we're working on here in Australia, is called the Dandelion Program. Autism at work is getting a lot of airtime, right? And to me, that's fantastic. Because if you look at people that go to university or technical schools, over 1% is actually in what they call the neurodiverse sphere. right? And so what that means is, from ADHD to autism. The higher you are in that sphere means that for the most part, these are really, really smart individuals, but cannot go through the proper recruitment process. So their CVs is either half a page or 40 pages, right? They get a lot of anxiety when it comes to an interview process. And so the DXC Dandelion program is working, again, with government and businesses to really prepare pools of talent to go into the workforce. And right now, in working with them to really understand, can we see what makes somebody great in specific roles? We've identified at least 3 roles in technology that they're really great at. One is cybersecurity, data science, and software testing. So ANZ Bank, as an example, has 5 people in their cybersecurity team and a few others in their software testing. But they prepare not just the individual, but also the hiring managers, the environment, to make sure that this team that goes into the workforce feels like they belong. So it's not just about the diversity aspect, but it's also the inclusion and the belonging. Wow. And to me, that's just amazing. The other one that, again, Australia is leading is, the professional services, the consulting companies are no longer asking for your GP score or no longer just going to the same schools. It's great to see that through AI, machine learning, again, and trying to understand what really makes somebody successful, not because of the silo that they're in, is allowing for people from all types of background to go after and be relevant in specific roles. What we're doing is it's not just about the role that you go in the first instance. So what we do is what we call is the one-to-many matching. The problem with today's, I suppose, the way you do things today is you apply for a job and you get matched if you're fit for the job. What AI and machine learning and what Pymetrics is doing to say you play one game and you only have to play that once every 14 months, and we can match you to any role in that company. So with Unilever, for their Future Leaders program, is we have 7 to 8 custom algorithms, and you get matched from sales, marketing, R&D, finance, procurement, and supply chain. Because more often than not, especially if you're graduating, you don't actually have a lot of experience, so your CV is going to be limited. Yeah. And so it's really about your future potential, which just goes back to a lot of companies are measuring future potential, but they're still using it as a CV. And so to me, that's a lagging indicator. It's what
the end of the CV is we welcome the end of the resume
exactly.
on behalf of someone who's written a lot of CVs.
That's right. And so, to me, it's technology, AI, machine learning is here to augment human capability. It's not really there to replace.
Thank you. So I'm just going to throw over to Mor for a moment. People don't understand AI, it's a general thing in our community, but you've developed something, or you're working on explainable AI. Can you explain explainable AI?
Yeah, so it's actually explainable AI. It's a research field in AI, and it's been around for a while, since the 70s, but it's now seeing a resurgence because of the increase in machine learning and deep learning methods. So machine learning and deep learning methods are basically a black box, right? We have so much data, they just, swallow it all up, and then they learn something, and then they give us some kind of output. But we don't necessarily know why or how or what are the parameters affecting this output. So explainable AI is about trying to add transparency to these algorithms, to be able to say why we got the results that we got, and to be able to replicate them if needed, and to be able to adjust them. And this is especially important because AI is being used now all over in lots of different fields, and we are coming across a lot of problems and biases that are being shown, which maybe I'll talk about a little bit later.
Go for it.
And so, should I just give an example, perhaps?
Go for it, no,
So,
please.
for example, in U.S. courts, they're using a tool called Compass, the Compass scale. So that's correctional offender management profiling for alternative sanctions. It's an algorithm from the North Point company. It's developed by North Point, and it's their intellectual property. Basically what it does is it calculates the likelihood of a person reoffending based on a number of factors, including their demographic information and their offense. And then basically what it does is it learned this to predict this likelihood through some sort of deep learning where they had all these instances. And this was actually used to, it's used as a recommendation. So in 2016, there was legislation that says courts may use it as a recommendation. And it's being used to recommend people to go back to jail or not to be paroled. And there has been a lot of controversy because machine learning and deep learning algorithms are only as good as the data that they have. And unfortunately, in certain areas in the United States, most of that data will be of people of color. And therefore, if you are of color, you would immediately be more likely to reoffend. And that's just, well, in a way, it's racism, right? So you need to be really, really careful when you're, when you're using these algorithms that they don't perpetuate some kind of human bias. So there was an instance in the case of Richard Loomis in the US, and he was sent back to prison based on this compass scale. And he was not able to put up a defense. Why? Because you only got the output, but the whole mechanism behind it is intellectual property. So there was no explanation as to why it was deemed that you're likely to reoffend. So what can he say?
Yeah.
And this is an actual case. There's been lots of problems with that. And that's, you know what? Let's even come back home. So who's heard of robodebt?
Yes.
So robodebt is, it's a kind of an algorithm used by the Centrelink to issue automatic debts to people for kind of taxation purposes. And a lot of people have been issued these debts. And the people, when they get this kind of thing, and it does says it's been issued by an automatic algorithm, blah, 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 but when they get it, they just want to get rid of it as quickly as possible. So most of the time they say, oh, wow, I owe this much, okay. And they seek to pay it off as soon as possible. But the thing is that there was a big mistake in this algorithm, and it really calculated it all wrong. So it averaged your whole income. Instead of looking at in a fortnightly way, it averaged it over the year, and then it kind of determined, okay, well, you didn't pay for these months, and you didn't pay, even though actually in these months, the person didn't even work. So it turned out that a lot of people, and especially people who are maybe from weaker places in society, elderly, single parents, and people with families, they had to pay a lot of money. And usually people just paid it off. And now there are, backlashes of this. People are saying it's caused a higher kind of death rate during those years because people couldn't afford medication. It took a while for them to get back. So again, very, very problematic, these instances. And explainable AI, for example, if we take the robodebt example, would have been, this is what you're due, this is what you need to pay us, and this is how it was calculated. And then when people look, well, I didn't work for that month, they would automatically know, okay, there's a mistake here. So, I'm not against robodebt. I don't think, oh no, we shouldn't be applying these things to important matters. We should, because it's going to save a lot of manpower and it's going to be more efficient and maybe even in some instances reduce the biases. But it needs to be transparent. It needs to be clear what exactly happened, and it needs to be clear to everyday people. So not only to the machine experts standing behind this. That's why this is so, I'm looking at this from an interdisciplinary perspective. We need to look at how people understand what kind of contrastive explanations to give, causal inferences. So we need to look at how people understand, and then we can utilize these tools.
Okay.
So more, is that what you call the white box approach,
Well,
where you can actually explain things on what's happening?
I am not familiar with that term, but it's kind of tricky because what happens a lot in deep learning is that you can't really explain the specific algorithm because you have no idea. It's neurons, right, shooting, and you don't know. So what you're trying to explain is which features contributed most. And basically, a way of explainable AI researchers to do this is to try to rerun it with different features and to say, okay, this is the key feature, this was very influential. So you can't directly explain what's in the black box,
Okay.
but you're attempting to explain why it gave that output.
So talking about global challenges, and we've got a few, you've mentioned climate change, Catherine. We've also got fake news, cybersecurity, hacks. What are the? And I'm turning to the panel here. What are some of the ways that AI can help in that? I mean, obviously they're being used for bad, but what do we need to do to change it to being used for good? In that sense.
So again, I mean, Kylie and I were talking about this earlier, right? Because as with any new or cutting edge technology, to me, so technology is neutral, right? Technology is neutral. It's the people that's designing that technology that is biased. And so you can, it's hard to remove bias from humans, but you can it's possible to remove bias from technology. The way from a Prometrics point of view, in the way we're addressing and that's why I kind of call it the white box. We don't use, I guess the level of technology that Mor spoke about, but it's from a pure AI and machine learning. It's really trying to understand what makes it up, right? And we do that check even before that algorithm goes live. We do that check when that algorithm is actually live, and then we refresh it, because you can't spit out an algorithm and then just leave it as is, because it will create that inherent bias. And so to us is, what are the balances and checks that the government, from a governance or a framework perspective, that companies, but even vendors like us, need to make sure that we are being transparent on how we're explaining how, the AI machine learning algorithms that we're developing continues to be unbiased. Yeah. And so one of the things that we do as an example is, for every client, once the algorithm is live and candidates are playing games, right, and we're getting all the data, is we do what we call an adverse impact study. Right, so, and we've done that for ANZ Bank, for Rio Tinto, for BHP, for anything, after a period of time, kind of go, is there an adverse impact to any demographics that have gone through that? To me, that's just one check.
Yep.
Right, depending on how well this is being.
But that's depending on your company as well too. Yeah. So you have to have that motivation.
But to me, it's the process, and there's work to do by government working alongside industry and businesses to say, here's a framework, and then educating everyone to ask the right questions. Yep.
Kath, I can see you writing furiously there.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. When you talked about that compass thing, the first thing that sprung into my mind was Minority Report.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Do you remember that movie with Tom Cruise? But I mean, it's a reasonably good movie, despite him being in it. And no, sorry, I really don't like him. So the idea that they had 3 siblings that could apparently predict the future was what was going to happen, and it's this whole question of, if you knew the day on which you were going to die, would you still behave the way you're behaving now? And will that still be the day that you're going to die on? And you end up in this whole cycle loop that you just drive yourself crazy of a paradox of actually what is the future? And Stephen Hawking had some great thoughts about this. Stephen Hawking also hated AI, if I remember rightly. Some of the last things he said about AI were that it was going to evolve faster than humans, and then we'd end up completely obsolete. And that reminds me of The Matrix, which I think is it's 20 years old. It was filmed in Australia. I don't know that it passes the Bechdel test, but it was certainly one of my favourite movies when I was a student at university. People have this notion of privacy, and I think in terms of keeping AI for good, we actually need some Jedi amongst the Sith here, because at the moment AI is being developed either for commercial purposes, for governmental monitoring, for defence purposes, and all of those things might have very good reasons behind them, but where are the people that are pushing the AI for social good, the AI for climate mitigation, the AI for prevention of diseases? I mean, look at the Ebola outbreak already. You know, how are they applying AI across the Ebola outbreak? Are they even? Yet they'll quite happily take our data and use it for Cambridge Analytica purposes. This idea of privacy, for me, is a lost notion. Privacy, for me, ended in about 1995. I think if we think we have privacy, we are idiots. We have walked into a surveillance state, not by our governments, but by our corporations. And as we look at more and more corporations actually become larger than the economies of some countries, it gets to the point where someone has to ask why. Now, whose responsibility is this? It's the government, right, to regulate industry. The government, we know, is always 5 or 10 years behind technology. So how on earth can we actually push? And I guess that's where the community has to be the Jedi, because the politicians are going to take too long if they could even understand the concepts that we're talking about. So this is where I think we've got an education, retraining, re-education opportunity. I think we're at a fulcrum of this technology finally getting into its own, and it's about now we need to put these things in place, otherwise it's going to run away in ways that we can't really fully understand. The idea of metadata, the fact that they can actually put together all of your... I mean, has anyone here ever actually downloaded an app onto their smartphone ever?
Yeah.
Right? And we go all the way through the terms and conditions and we click agree. Now, I used to, when I could drink wine, but before I was pregnant, I would sit and try and read some of those T's and C's. And I realised exactly what I was handing over, and I said yes anyway, because I wanted to use the thing. Now, I haven't done that face aging app, because everyone talks about, oh, you know, it's some foreign nation trying to get all of your aging data for their health statistics, for them, you know, this, that, and the other. And you know what? Probably is. And you've probably signed over a lot. 98% of 2-year-olds have digital footprints, including my 20-month-old son, who I have put pictures on a locked Instagram of, for example. But your metadata, the data that you're producing just by walking around, people are able to access that and actually make understandings and decisions about your life. You might have private health insurance. You might have said on that private health insurance that you go to the gym every day, because we all go to the gym every day in our heads, right? So, you know, but they will actually know, if you then go on and have a disease or have an issue, they will now know, actually, we know where your gym was, and we know that you went there once, and then to the pub afterwards. And so there's this data that we're accidentally handing over all the time, and that is what makes me nervous. It's not about the progress of AI, which I think is wonderful, and people call it IA now as well, intelligence augmentation. The singularity does not bother me. The idea that we're going to have really very powerful AI predicting how we live and affecting our lives when it comes to our health, when it comes to our children's lives, that's where I think we're not having the right conversations.
So going to health, for example, and you're saying that we're not using it for breast cancer, where's the plug? You know, we often talk about it in the university sector, there's not enough translation, you know, we're the lowest in the OECD. But if these technologies are there, surely globally there's an advantage, an economic advantage to scanning for cancer, because there's so much money put into the medical research.
This is where there's a really very complex ecosystem built up there between the providers, pharmaceutical companies, private healthcare insurers, social healthcare mechanisms, how that's funded, whether we want Gattaca, you know, whether we want to be, you know, what personalised medicine is going to be fantastic. And one of the things that UQ has been trying to do is there was a test to see whether or not you individually would react badly or well to certain chemotherapy drugs. So if you needed to have chemo, here's a list of say 10 drugs. They take your sample and they work out actually that one's going to be really bad for you, but that one's going to be really good. And so you can actually have a personalised chemotherapy treatment. Now, that would cost $30 per person. Do you think they got funding for it? No. And so this is where, as a society, we have to ask ourselves, you know, okay, so defence is going to be spending, and I understand why defence spends the way they do. Defence is going to be spending X, Y, and Z. We have to ask ourselves again as a society, what do we want to be spending our money on? I mean, there's just so many places you can spend your money on it. But if money is being spent on developing AI to read scans better than the human eye, I mean, we've all been to hospitals in the middle of the night where someone's looked at an X-ray or something and they're very tired and they've probably pulled a long shift and you wouldn't even know how much sleep that junior doctor's had. And they're making decisions right then and there, looking at something that they can see. Well, if I haven't slept for 2 days, I can't see straight. Why do we expect a junior doctor to be able to make the right decision based on an X-ray? Well, we shouldn't be, but we should be trusting that the thing that we're using is designed not to cause us to spend more money on a certain type of drug, or not to suddenly put us in a basket of, you're too hard to insure, you're going to be over there. And I guess we don't have this yet, but we could have, and that's the call,
Is
right?
there somewhere that's doing it more?
Oh, yeah, I'd like to chime in, be the good cop for a second.
Yes,
This
please.
is AI for social good. Let's keep
Yeah,
the
we've
people
gone
happy.
back to AI for social good.
Well, no, it is potentially for social good,
No,
but
no,
it's about
I'm sorry.
applying it for social good, and I don't know that that is actually happening enough, and I think it's a massive opportunity.
It is,
Like
you
the
know.
NHS in the UK is desperate for this, because we need to find ways to keep the cost down so the current government in the UK doesn't privatise it, basically.
Well, I have to say, everything you said, you know, is terrifying me out of my wits, and I have been thinking about this as well. But we have to remember that, you know, before trains, you know, were publicly used, it was deemed that this would be the end of humanity. They'd be awful for people. People couldn't, it's not healthy for people to get on a train and move that fast. So everything new has been deplored as the worst thing ever to happen. And I'm referring specifically to the lack of privacy. So I completely agree that it's, you know, we don't know what's happening with it and what's it going, but maybe part of it at least, it's not such a big deal. Okay, so let's look at the hospitals. So all of these people working 20-hour shifts, they're so tired. AI and all this information could actually give us tools to make their shifts a little bit smaller. So that's good. And then also in terms of, you know, where is all this research doing AI for social good? Well, you know, at least in the universities, I can tell you, Monash has a new Data Futures Institute, which is strictly developed and dedicated to social good. Lots of money going into that. And that's money that's not coming out, because this is research that pretty much does not get a lot of funding, but they're just putting it in there. And not only, so Europe is not so much, but the US, again, they just hired for Harvard to pretty much lead the whole domain. They hired Milan Tambe, who is only doing work on AI for social good. So they're starting to look at impact versus publications, impact versus a lot of funding usually, and it's not there. It's MIT as well, CMU. So in terms of the universities, this is really starting to pick up, especially in the few recent years. If I had, you know, just started to do computer science, I would be stoked to be at this time, because I can really make a difference. So many options for me to do things. You know, if you're looking at conservation, if you're looking at medical, if you're looking at social work, intelligent tutoring, if you're looking at intelligent ways to help people learn. So this is all things that are happening all over, and wonderful trends. So there's a lot of hope here. And yeah, you know, it's really scary when you think about it, but everything was when it just started.
So we've got 15 minutes left. Has anyone got any questions? And if so, the microphone, you have to walk up to the microphone.
That was quick.
And please tell
Very,
us
very
who you
fast.
are and where you're from.
Hello, I'm Hannah. I just had to look at my name tag for that. I'm from QT and I'm just a sponsor student. I'm doing a bachelor's in IT. And I just have a question about, you know, you said that the jobs are like changing, and how like there's going to be a job deficit, but there's also going to be like more jobs. But I'm just wondering, like, these new jobs, are they going to be like able to like help the people that just lost their jobs, or are they going to be able to cater for new change and stuff like that? And also like the social divide, I imagine, like for university educated versus non-university educated, where like AI is going to take over the simple jobs and then humans are, I don't actually know, but like humans are going to take over the more complex stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my question.
I think that's 4 questions. Right?
Okay.
So one of the first things that you said is, you know, the jobs of today versus the jobs of tomorrow. All right. So, you know, as we work with large companies and as we work with government, so we were able to participate just a couple of months ago in the Singapore Government Innovation Summit, and it's coming from, you know, from the Prime Minister himself around the it's really up to government and businesses to really make sure that as technology innovation accelerates, that we do the right thing in making sure that reskilling is an area of focus for many companies. If you look at Accenture, again, who's publicly announced it, right? So 6% of their cost savings 90% of their cost savings through automation is actually spent on reskilling. How are we helping them with that? Is that, again, they already know which roles that's either going to be partially automated or fully automated that's going to happen over the next 12 to 24 months. And to them, it's about how do you look after that 450,000 employees and actually reskill them, because they also know that there's going to be new jobs that's going to be available. So again, it's about how do you have that, how do you elevate, the specific behaviors and traits that you could see in somebody's future potential. So that's what we're doing with them, is how do you start identifying what are those future roles that you're going to start investing in? And how do we look at your employee base today that potentially is going to be impacted, and have a more proactive way of identifying where they can be great, and give them that runway and the option to say, we can reskill you. We're committed to that. And Accenture is doing that. DBS is a regional bank out of Singapore, but they just won the best digital bank of the world. Their call center, 500 call center operators that they know because of automation is going to be impacted. They were able to move every single one of them to the new areas that their view is they're going to be investing in. So instead of a company kind of laying off on one end and then hiring on the other, it's about if we can have technology identify like who is going to be who amongst your workforce can be reskilled. The right companies or the good companies are focusing on that, and government is focusing on that. And so to us, it's no longer about the CV. I spoke about the Dandelion Project. One of the best cybersecurity individuals that came out of that program was actually a nurse, right? And so again, it's somebody's instinct initially, and AI and machine learning is allowing that to be more data driven. And so hopefully that answers your question. So the last one is, there isn't a job that starts from zero, right? So there's always a stepping stone. So if I were to look at data science, that didn't exist 10 years ago, but you have business analysts, technical analysts, database analysts, and depending on the industry, they eventually evolved to one of the highest paying jobs today, which is data science. And so to us, it's about working with those businesses to have the right data inputs to say, what are the emerging roles, and what are the feeder roles today? So you look at, Scrum Masters, and, as companies go agile, that's project management at the core of it. So again, it's looking at that holistically, whether it's IT or marketing or operations, who are your great project managers today that we can actually move into those roles.
I've got two very quick
Okay, go
points.
for it.
So in the corporate world, when we were looking at some of these things, there's welcome to the fifth industrial revolution. It's a perfect time to be graduating from the subject that you're studying. But the key message here is that qualifications are not the future. It's skills-based aptitude testing that is the future. So you've got to make sure that as a student, you keep your experience and your breadth of horizon incredibly wide, and make sure you keep in with the art side of things and keep in with the culture side of things. Because without art, technology doesn't work, right? Creative thinking is one of the things that robots are terrible at and humans are great at. So in the corporate world, retraining someone costs about 20 grand into cybersecurity. In fact, female admin staff are great at cybersecurity, human processes, being able to follow the rules, understanding how humans work. But the future of work is changing. There have been studies done around this. The Japanese reckoned a 3-day working week is the optimum amount of work. Who's ever done a 3-day work? I've never done a 3-day working week. And then the Swedish actually thought it was the 4-day working week, and on the 5th day you're still paid by your business, but you're sent out to go to the art galleries, you're sent out to go to the theatre, you're sent out to go and hang out with your nanny, you're sent out to go and learn chess. You need to relax your long neurons and refresh your brain so that you're worth something to them. If you work more than 50 hours a week, you might as well be drunk. I think that's how I did some of my best work when I was in corporate land. I shall finish it there.
All right, okay, next question. We've got two, so we're going to give 2-minute answers for each of these.
Let's do it.
Hello,
We've
my
got
name is
three.
Wendy Oxton. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a tech startup called Mark AI, which is predicting misunderstandings and blow-ups occurring in digital communication.
Interesting.
I need you.
The one thing I'm keen to understand is what process or questions do you ask that can identify unintended consequences of your intelligence or the artificial intelligence you're creating, and what process do you go through to determine what's acceptable and what's not? I've asked lots of people, I've reached out, but no one's like, oh, that's a really good question, but we don't have any. So is there any specific framework or guidelines that is creating this overarching governance that we can all use?
More.
So it's actually a great question. I can tell you that from my knowledge, there is not. But from my experience and from what I've seen, usually when there is bias and when there is it's in the data. So finding a way to go over the data and like you said, seeing
Sample size as well.
sample sizes, seeing gender representations, finding a way to kind of just get the numbers on who is and what is a good way to kind of look at it. That is, if you don't want to have an explainable algorithm. So talk to me.
All right. Next
Sorry,
question.
and the other one to add to that is, can you actually close the loop and measure what you intended to do? So that's one way.
Hi, I'm Sonam. I'm at QUT. I'm doing my PhD in human-computer interaction. So actually sort of related to what she was asking was looking at the ethical issues that can arise from these things, especially with relation to privacy, health data, people tracking. What sort of background processes would you want to see installed, and would they be passive in the code, or would they be more active in terms of permissions, restrictions, or freely, or would they be at a governmental level of policy?
Okay, so again, it's a very similar question. And again, code is not biased, right? The code cannot be biased. What can be biased is what comes from people. So if you're using machine learning and you're looking at a sample size which has only, white women, then it's going to be biased. So you need to make sure that your sample is diverse first when you're doing that. And you need to also continually update your sample sizes and your data, and to try to continually learn from it. But there is now legislation going on, especially in Europe, into ethical AI, and what it is requiring is a certain level of transparency. So you need to be able to have the algorithm kind of account for the output, and that way, at least if you can see what key features were influencing that decision, then you'd be able to kind of say, okay, well, if I can see that the key feature is the neighborhood where that person lived or the skin color, then you'll know that there's something wrong with your algorithm.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, sorry. I think, well, maybe we've got two.
I'll make it.
Yeah, we've got two. Yeah, okay. Let's get our final two questions.
So, Catherine, you were talking about the fact that we can't necessarily trust the motivations of where the money currently lies, of the network of pharmaceutical companies and medical companies and insurers and everything. And I agree with that. What do you suggest we do about it? Are you suggesting a revolution or?
You don't know me very well, do you? Look, I'm a massive believer in social healthcare. I think if healthcare is there, like the NHS was set up after World War II by a Conservative government in the UK, and the idea there was to not have people dying on the streets. And I've lived and worked in countries where I've seen people literally dying on the streets, clutching CT scans and X-rays, and it's horrific. So for me, social healthcare is absolutely, of course we live in a capitalist society, but we decide how we spend our government's money. Right? Ultimately, our MPs are supposed to be the people that work for us. So if you have concerns about these things, either become an MP or talk to your MP, because that's the only pathway to really make decisions around this. And I think when someone like Facebook says to the US government, please help regulate us because we can't regulate ourselves, which is kind of what I understood was being said at the time, I get very worried then that we've let these horses bolt and then suddenly we've got to fix the mess that comes behind it. We've had to do that in so many different industries, not just the pharmaceutical industry. we all like to think that people do things for the right reasons, but we know that that's not necessarily true. We're at a turning point now where I think with the age of social media that we can call things and see things in ways we've never seen before. My big concerns really about this, though, is there's two things we haven't really touched on today. One is cybersecurity. If you think the future of war is not cyber, you've got another thought coming. We're already technically probably at war with a couple of nations in terms of our cybersecurity frameworks. And the other one is deep fakes. We cannot detect deep fakes. I'm wondering what Mor's opinion might be on that. We're going to run out of time today. But for me, the idea of deep fakes and data that is fake, well, fake news was just the tip of the iceberg, right? And how we actually identify that, collar that and disagree with that, I am really interested to see. We're going to have, like with drones, we've got a drones ecosystem and an anti-drone ecosystem. So the new drones are the anti-drone drones, right? They're the ones that you invest in now. So then we're going to have good AI, bad AI, but whose ethics? When we talk about ethics frameworks, whose ethics? My ethical framework might be very different to Mor's, might be very different to Kylie's and Grace's. Like, who decides what the ethics are? Whose values are those? Are they white Western values? Like, where are we actually going to be creating these opportunities from? But yeah, I don't know the answer, really.
There is actually a European ethics legislation committee. So it's comprised of researchers from all over the world and industrial people. So they have taken a wide range of people, some of whom I know, that are really passionate about this. And it's a step in the right direction.
The EU took 5 years to actually decide and define what a drone was before they put their drone legislation in. So.
Okay, our final question.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for your insight. My name is Massa Macaulay. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Engineering from Auckland, New Zealand. So I would like to know your insight about, we talk about government, commercial, environment. So what are the impacts of AI on education? I'm asking that question. I have a 2.5-year-old. She's asking, Alexa and Google Assistant to play Peppa Pig for her. Yeah. And I'm just really wondering, the AI is really going to change the shape of education as we know it now. So do you have any examples of, right now, some of the applications of AI in education?
1 minute, Catherine.
Oh, God.
Aren't you AI education?
Yes, I've seen a couple of things happening, and it's all to do with learning outcomes. I think it's because it's so early in the technology. The advice actually is, from a couple of things I've seen, that screen time is not actually as bad for our kids as we thought it was. There's a very interesting book I read called The Shallows, which is about how the internet is changing our brains. And the main crux that came out of this, and as a mother I can tell you this is the thing that I'm looking for now, is the development of long neurons in our brain is absolutely fundamental to mental health. It's fundamental to how we process things. It's fundamental to our sleep. When we're constantly getting Instagram likes and stuff like that, that's the short neurons, that's the instant gratification. We've all lost hours inside an Instagram rabbit hole, right? So that is where it's not healthy. So in terms of children's motor skills, being able to do fine motor movement, they found that kids that actually have some screen time, like tap the games and the colour games and this, that and the other, they have actually got really better fine motor skills than kids that don't go near technology at all. The key is, as with everything in life, balance. And so for AI, looking at how that's actually coming through the education system, the one thing that does concern me with anything that's predictive is that you get put into a bucket that isn't necessarily representative of who you are. I remember I've got a PhD in statistics, and I got a B. It was my only B. Everything else was A's and A stars when I did my GCSEs in maths. I got the lowest grade because they put me in the wrong class because I did a bad day on an exam test. And we've all had bad days in exam tests, and we don't want those to represent who we are. And so that's my major concern. But it's been happening before AI got here. It's, people being pigeonholed through the sausage machine of education has been around for a long time.
We're done. Thank you. Thank you.